I get to be the composer of my own show. But what do you feel like you should have known that maybe you didn't at the time?
Well, I just sort of feel like I was a late bloomer in virtually every way. I was a late bloomer in high school. I like physically did not grow until I was like done with high school. I took a year off after high school. And that was probably one of the best things I ever did. In college, I really sort of started to become, I feel like, who I wanted to be. And before that, I kind of wasn't there yet. I literally would sit at home. The reason that I got good at improvising and playing the piano generally and using my ears, because that's all I did. Like I didn't like the first party that I went to in high school was literally my graduation party. So but then in college I sort of grew into, I think, more of the person that I wanted to be, and a big part of that had to do with this a cappella group that I was in, and I became the music director, and it was like a real laboratory for me musically. I did a lot of arranging, and but then when I was here and working with David and got this sort of like thing that he wanted me to do, it did feel like it was too much for me at the time. And in retrospect, there was another opportunity that I had at one point where I wasn't like ready to do that. While I was at USC, I don't know if you know John Ehrlich. He's a big composer, and we're actually really good friends now through totally separate means. Our kids go to the same school, and John, I was at like some dinner of a friend of mine, and John was at this dinner. They happened to know him, and I was at USC, and he was a little bit older and was working, and he was doing a lot of commercials, and he had like a studio and like the whole thing, and I was like, talking his ear off. And basically, at some point, he like offered me a job while I was at USC. And I turned it down because I was like not ready. And so then when this thing happened with David, I guess I just felt like I wasn't ready. And then when David came back and sort of fixed everything and like made everybody happy, I felt like I didn't exactly feel like a failure, but I felt like I was just like, I don't want to do this. This sucks. It hurt me, and like it was not fun. There was like almost nothing fun going on, and it's not what I. It's funny because when I saw David work, he seemed like he was having a great time, but it didn't seem like it worked out that way for me. Anyway, whatever. And I was also, at the same time, very interested in songs and making records, and I was like, well, I'll just be Coldplay. And I had some stuff going on with that, so there was a reason to. It was easier to go in that direction. It was just sort of like, this is something I actually tell people when they ask me like how to do stuff, or like how to get this job, or how to be a musician as a living or whatever. I usually say something like, you just have to do everything. You have to know how to do everything. The more stuff you know how to do, the more irons you can put in the fire, the better. And that is not always true for everyone, but it was true for me. Some people are more like, I want to do this thing and I'm not going to do anything else.
Yeah,
so
very
like,
specialized. Yeah.
Yeah, but I always felt like I didn't really know like what was going to work out. I just knew that I wanted to pay rent and I was good at music. That's like basically all I knew.
Well, and so then how do you recover then from this experience where you are having, zero fun on this project? David comes in basically, saves the day, I guess, in a sense. But I'm sure that is probably quite, an ego blow, if not directly, then at least kind of in your heart being like, man, this is not at all for me. How do you come back to this industry? How do you get called back to this industry after leaving?
Well, it was really through David again. Basically, I spent that was like 99, 2000, somewhere in there.
To go pursue,
and then I spent like the next many years producing, mixing, writing songs for various things. and making my own records. I made like 5 records, and I toured like super janky tours.
Amazing.
And then at one point, towards the end of that, I did a really big tour, and I opened for Alanis Morissette in Europe. And that was this was, I thought, what was going to be, the life-changing moment. And it was life-changing in some ways. It was not life-changing in terms of my career as an artist. But basically, I came back from that, and it's really apropos of nothing other than the fact that it didn't like, nothing exploded at that moment. I basically came back. My wife had a baby. She exploded, I guess. And then and then I guess, well, basically I got a call from David, and he's like, "Hey, I'm working on this show, and we need some songs. Let's get together and write some songs for this show." I had never really done that with him before. He was always my boss, and we had never sort of collaborated on anything. And so that I was like, great, this sounds great. And this show was Arrested Development, and I would go in every couple of weeks, and that was the way back. Basically, after that, I started working with him on other things and started getting a little more into the scoring part of it and enjoying that more. And I was also physically out of his space. I would go there to do the songs for Arrested, and that was super fun, and it wasn't like every day, so that was also appealing to me. And my responsibility was purely creative, so that was also appealing. And I got to sing on stuff and play on stuff, and we were really co-writing, and that was a great experience. So suddenly I'm like back in TV, but it was like in a very sort of unusual and song-centric way. Anyway, then I basically asked him if I could do more stuff with him, and he was like, "Sure, this is great." And so we did that, and I spent several years working with him on a few other shows that were like 13 and done. But that was like a real. By the time that period of time was done, which was like, now we're talking about 2008-ish, I really felt like I had training. It was like I was his, like it wasn't being an assistant. It was more of being like a protege and learning from a master. And because essentially I was making stuff and I would present it to him, and he'd like give me notes, and like gradually the notes would get less and less, and gradually he would trust me to do stuff. And that is like, that was everything. That changed everything and made me way more confident. And then with that confidence, I think also came hunger to get my own things going. And that was sort of, so I owe David a lot for that. He was instrumental in sort of like helping me sort of find how to, like, training me, basically. He like trained me.